I think having been in the identity space, kind of in the front row seat with a lot of the enterprise, IAM projects and products that we're deploying, we've seen where the companies were somewhat blindsided to new environments and new problems that were sort of already brewing, but hadn't yet manifested themselves to the scale and size that would be considered a big enough problem to solve. What I'm referring to is in the 2014, 2015, you had adoption of public cloud technologies, AWS kind of leading that movement. You had teams that were already changing the application development and adopting new approaches like DevOps and automation and tooling. All that was happening sort of almost like outside of the control frameworks and constructs that existed in the same company that have been built and matured for years. That includes identity and access management, tooling and process, and so on, and policies. It almost felt like this new world was sort of evolving and emerging on its own. And for a while, it was kind of not being seen and noticed from security and IAM side. But it was also soon when we saw the problems specifically in the related breaches in this environment. You I'm sure will recall one that made a big sort of headlines was the Capital One breach in AWS, and that was already the time when Brighter was the product, sort of the product design was already in flight. And we had already talked to several people in our circle, including CISOs and technology leaders, who told us that, well, they couldn't use the existing products in their cloud environments because the teams didn't like them. They were flat out sort of rejecting these existing products because they were seen as they're very sort of high friction and more like a barrier to the velocity, the agility of their cloud, environments and the processes. So that was an interesting way to sort of understand the problem and then kind of really start digging into why that is the case. And it came down to things like, well, one, the identity products that we knew that were built for data center were really not built to be the first line of defense. They weren't built to be the first security product. It was normally the firewalls and the other layers of security before you get to even the identity management system. Cloud had completely turned it upside down. It was the first line of defense. The other thing was also with that, security of access was essentially assumed to be good enough with the existing access model. Like, for example, you're a developer, you need access to compute in AWS, you need storage, whatever. Here's your admin access to be able to stand up EC2 instances or whatever. And that's fine because that's how things have been done before. Turns out, very bad idea because as soon as that access gets in the hands of a malicious user, something bad will happen. That's what the Capital One breach really kind of surfaced. And a lot of times in the cloud, access was given very broadly because the cloud technologies being new technologies and the infrastructure teams not being IAM experts didn't really didn't really need to go and understand every fine grained detail of access, and decide what would be the least privileged access to give to the user. They just gave them full admin. And that admin access existed there 24/7, whether that user needed it or not. And what also complicates, and the other part of the problem you were alluding to is not only these users needed that access to be able to go in and log in themselves, they also need that to automate things like Terraform. They wanted access for the Terraform job to be able to go and execute tasks automatically. There's your API tokens, keys, credentials, logins in some cases. And to your point, yeah, those things sort of quietly exploded in the environment and nobody even noticed how it happened. For us, that was the tip of the iceberg. That was what was actually to come at a much bigger scale a few years down the road when these organizations went to, for example, using cloud, just to try and deploy a few applications to, okay, now we're going to shift everything to cloud. And we were predicting that to happen, give it 5 years or so. Cloud is going to become the center of gravity, not like some kind of a project sandbox that they're going to do. Here we are. And soon after, we also were seeing the evolution of new technologies and AI very quickly came to prove that. So when we were thinking about a solution, we were thinking about that. We were thinking about how this problem can go from yeah, maybe it's a problem. It's not big enough today. So it is so big that unless you solve it now and you solve it for your future 5 to 10 years, your business will most likely suffer major losses and consequences. We saw some businesses actually shut down from some sort of a catastrophic breach. Right. So, and I think that's also very much true now with the AI and agentic AI initiatives that organizations are looking at and saying, if we don't really put some security guardrails around these new technologies, agentic AI and AI technologies that we're adopting, they could become catastrophic, if compromised, if breached, right? So, yeah, that's a little bit of the both the origin story and where we are today with the new technologies.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of companies that are still, or even people that are still kind of not understanding the real security risk with agentic AI, allowing an AI agent to have access to, your calendar, your email, your text messages, right? Your account on, let's say, Expedia or whatever, when you're texting your friends saying, "Hey, let's go do a trip to Vegas," and that AI immediately starts populating, prices for different things based on what you guys are talking about. And you're just, clicking a button saying, yeah, book it. And it goes and does that. Well, it has your credit card information. It has access to all these other accounts, right? Like it has the ability, if it has that ability, it'll change it, right? Like it could change it if it wanted to, all these different things. And so like that's exploding environments, right? We're just at the very beginning of it. I mean, this is literally something that is 6, 8 months old for agentic AI. I mean, I don't even think that was a term last year. Was it? Or was I just out of the game?
No, no, you're right. No, it was about LLMs and
Right.
yeah, but agentic AI is probably a year old. That became your popular.
Yeah. Yeah. That's when it's really started to like kind of increase in its popularity of uses. And I just feel like we just spent the last year and people are just now kind of waking up to what it actually is.
Yeah, and I think the example you were describing earlier, kind of that human to AI assistant interaction and AI assistant performing tasks on behalf of a human. That's very, very popular and very much already in production use, right? Both from business context and consumer context standpoint. But what we're also seeing now, as I'm sure you know, is the agent to agent and agentic system deployments. And this is where it's like the next evolution of the agentic technologies is when not only a human will direct an agent to do things, but also in an agentic system, you have agents directing other agents, creating maybe even agents kind of for a specific task and potentially even eliminating that agent when the task is done. Much more complex, much more advanced kind of AI use case, much more difficult to secure as well. And especially from identity standpoint.
Yeah. Art, just from talking with you, right? Like you've obviously done the technical side, like you said in the very beginning of our session here, right? But now with you being the CEO of a company, even though it's still a technical company, right? Like I mean, you're very much in the weeds of people's environments and whatnot. How do you stay up to date with all the different evolutions of cybersecurity, of technology overall that's going on? I mean, we're seeing like back to back monumental shifts in not just security, but in technology just overall. And so like I'm really curious to hear your answer to it because I mean you're kind of in both worlds. I mean, that's very difficult. That's really difficult to achieve. I haven't talked to that many CEOs that have achieved that in my opinion.